Good morning, Year 10. Well done for your amazing efforts so far. I know it's really challenging, but today is your last virtual lesson until you return, and I'm looking forward to seeing you back in the classroom. So as you can see from the worksheet on Show My Homework, today's lesson is going to be reading, annotating, and analysing Act 3, Scene 4, Scene 5, and Scene 6. It's going to follow the exact same format as last Monday's quadruple, where we're going to read and annotate together, and then you're going to complete a task independently. Before we get started, please make sure that you have your Macbeth books. Please also make sure you have a highlighter and a pen. Pause the video now, make sure those things are ready. Okay, and so before we read scene 4, I'm just going to give you a brief summary of what happens. That is on the screen now, so pause the video and read the summary of scene 4. Excellent. So the focus of our reading and writing today will be on Banquo's ghost and the impact that has and what that suggests about Macbeth's deteriorating state of mind. Okay, please turn your Macbeth books to page 67. Pause the video and do that now if you need a moment. And let's get started. Just a reminder to pause the video at any moment if you need a moment to catch up with the annotations. And obviously you can always rewind if you need to. Okay, so this scene takes place in a hall in the palace, and there is a banquet prepared. Into Macbeth, Lady Macbeth, Ross, Lennox, lords, and attendants. You know your own degree. Sit down at first and last the hearty welcome. Thanks to your majesty. Ourself will mingle with society and play the humble host. Our hostess keeps her state, but in best time will require her welcome. Pronounce it for me, sir, to all our friends, for my heart speaks they are welcome. So all that's happening here is Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, who are now king and queen, are welcoming their guests. First murderer appears at the door. See, they encounter thee with their hearts' thanks, both sides are even. Here I'll sit, is the midst, be large in mirth, and none will drink and measure the table round. Approaching the door. Macbeth is saying here that the table is full, I'm going to sit in the middle, everyone enjoy themselves, soon we'll have a toast around the table. So this is just them welcoming their guests. Now the interesting thing about this opening is Macbeth and Lady Macbeth play the generous hosts, much like they did when Duncan and Banquo were in their castle. So let's do our first annotation. Oop, not sure why this isn't working. Play the generous hosts. I'm going to take a little bit more care in my writing today because I know the last video it's a bit of a mess. Okay, and there's a particular word that is repeated multiple times throughout this opening. See if you can identify it before I tell you. You should have guessed that it was the word welcome. So highlight that word, please. It's repeated 3 times by Lady Macbeth and Macbeth in the opening 8 lines. And this attempt at being gracious makes their behaviour more shocking because they are being very obviously sly to avoid any suspicion or attention. So we're going to write attempt at graciousness makes their behaviour more shocking. Okay, pause here if you need a second, but if not, let's move on. So the murderer approaches the door, and Macbeth said, "There's blood on my face. 'Tis Banquo's then, 'tis better thee without than he within is he dispatched. My lord, his throat is cut that I did for him. Thou art the best of the cutthroats, yet he's good that did the like for Fleance. If thou didst it, thou art the nonpareil. Most royal sir, Fleance escaped. Then comes my fit again. I had else been perfect, whole as the marble, founded as the rock, as broad and general as the casing air. But now I am cabined, cribbed, confined, bound into saucy doubts and fears. But Banquo's safe." So Macbeth identifies that the murderer has blood on his face, and the murderer reveals that it is Banquo's. And Macbeth gruesomely here says he'd rather it be splattered on the face of the murderer than flowing through his veins. He asks, "Is Banquo dead?" The murderer says that he has cut his throat. Macbeth says, "You are the best at cutting throat, but whoever did the same to Fleance is also good. And if you cut both their throats, then you are the absolute best. No one can compare." The murderer reveals that Fleance has in fact escaped, and Macbeth has a moment again of fear. He says that he's scared again, and if Fleance was dead, he would have been perfect, solid as a piece of marble, firm as a rock, as free as the air. But now he's imprisoned by doubts and fears. Okay, let's get some annotations. There's blood on my face. Again, blood is symbolic of guilt. The bloody daggers, blood on their hands, now blood on the face, it's symbolic of guilt. This is where Macbeth reveals that he would rather the blood be on the murderer's face than in Banquo's body. "'Tis better thee without than he within." And there's some wordplay going on here. And often, when wordplay is a positive thing, it often hints at something quite light-hearted or jovial. So this almost suggests Macbeth's pleasure at not only Banquo's murder, but the visual reminder of that on the murderer's face. So wordplay suggests pleasure. Okay, now we're going to look at Macbeth's final speech at the bottom here, and we're going to get a lot of annotation, so do feel free to pause if you need a moment. Macbeth says, "Then comes my fit again," saying that he's scared again. And the word fit kind of indicates a negativity in his health and well-being. And this is a reference to before, when he was speaking to the murderers, that he would be sick if Banquo was still alive and that Fleance was still alive. So this is a ref, you can shorthand that to being sick if, and again we can shorthand Banquo and Fleance, just like we do for Lady Macbeth, we can do B and F, are alive. Okay. And let's highlight this line. Was the marble founded as the rock, as broad and general as the casing? Have a think. What method is being used there? So you should have identified that they are in fact similes. I'm just going to rub those out. Rewind if you need to look at those again. So these are in fact similes. These similes provide an insight into the sense of security that Macbeth felt like he would have, but now that the plan has failed, that sense of security is gone. Similes provide an insight into Macbeth's sense of security. Okay, highlight this line. There's another method being used there, so have a think about what that is. And you should have guessed that it is alliteration with the C's. Cabin, cribbed and confined. The alliteration here enhances his fear. Let me know if my handwriting's any better, because I feel like I'm taking it slower today. So let me know if it's clearer. And also we're going to add to this line cabin, cribbed, confined and bound. These are all words in the semantic field of imprisonment. Which shows that Macbeth is hindered by the failure of this plan. Pause here if you need a second. If not, I'm going to move forward. Okay. I, my good lord, safe in a ditch he bides, with 20 trenched gashes on his head, the least a death to nature. Thanks for that. There the grown serpent lies, the worm that's fled have nature that in time will venom breed, no teeth for the present. Get thee gone, tomorrow we'll hear ourselves again. Exit murderer. So before we go on to Lady Macbeth, let's get some annotations for this section. Just finishing off the murderer. The murderer said that Banquo has 20 trench gashes on his head, 20 deep cuts in his head, and this is a vivid and horrific image. And Macbeth says that the adult snake, serpent, lies in the ditch, but the young snake, the worm, which is Fleance, has escaped. And in time it will become poisonous, will breed venom and threatening, but for now he has no fangs, no teeth. And then he asks the murderer to leave. Now this is particularly important because earlier, when trying to persuade the murderers, he says that the snake has been scorched. Okay, so this links to his earlier threat. Once again, the deed is gone undone and there's still a threat to him, which is the worm. Make sure you circle the worm. Okay. And circle serpent for me. Now, the word serpent keeps popping up. Okay, look like the innocent fowl be the serpent under it. The idea of the snake is popping up. Now, this is a motif. Don't worry too much about that yet, because we're going to do a lot more in-depth information and teaching of this. But for now, I just want to jot down that it's a motif. We'll talk about what it represents a little bit later. Okay, let's carry on reading. So the murder exits. Lady Macbeth says, "My royal lord, you do not give the cheer, the feast is sold. That is not often vouched while 'tis a making. 'Tis given with welcome to feed. We're best at home, from thence the source to meet is ceremony, meeting or there without it." Lady Macbeth says, "You're not entertaining the guests. You need to make sure they feel welcome. And you need to make sure you're doing your job as king and host here. Sweet remembrancer, now good digestion wait on appetite and health on both." And Macbeth proceeds to toast with the guests. "May it please your highness sit." The ghost of Banquo enters and sits in Macbeth's place. Before we get on to the ghost of Banquo, which is the most important part of the scene, let's just remind ourselves that the ghost of Banquo is another example of phantasmagoria. Phantasmagoria. Here had we now our country's honours roofed, were the graced person of our Banquo present, who may I rather challenge for unkindness than pity for mischance. His absence, sir, lays blame upon his promise. Please it your highness to grace us with your royal company. So Macbeth says that normally we have all the nobility of Scotland, but Banquo isn't here. And he hopes that he's late, not due to unkindness, but just something bad happening to him, mischance. Ross says, his absence means that he's broken a promise to you. So don't worry about him. Why don't you just grace us, the people that are present? And Macbeth continues by saying, "The table is full. Here is a place reserved, sir. Where? Here, my good lord. What is it that moves your highness? Which of you have done this? What, my good lord?" So Macbeth believes that the table is full because Banquo's ghost has taken up a seat. And obviously it's clear that only Macbeth can see this ghost. Let's get some annotations for this part. Macbeth says that he hopes that Banquo isn't here because of something bad happening to him, as opposed to him being unkind. And this is ironic because he has had Banquo murdered. So this is ironic as he knows something is bad has happened to him. And again, this links to the theme of appearance versus reality. I'm just going to write app versus reality. Again, we can shorthand because I know there's not a lot of space in the book. He's appearing to be one thing, but in reality he's something different. Okay. Macbeth at the end here says, "Which of you has done this?" He attempts to blame one of the lords for crafting this ghost in front of him. And this is significant because it seems like Macbeth is familiar with deceit. He automatically assumes that somebody is out to get him. So let's write, he's familiar with deceit, and that is as a result of his own deceit. Pause here if you need a second, because we're going to move on. Thou canst not say I did it, never shake thy gory locks at me. Gentleman, rise, his highness is not well. Macbeth, speaking to Banquo's ghost here, says, you can't say I did it. Stop shaking your head at me. And Ross believes that Macbeth is ill. Lady Macbeth says, sit down, sit, worthy friends. My lord is often thus, and hath been from his youth. Pray you keep seat. The fit is momentary. Upon a fort he will again be well. If much you note him, you shall offend him and extend his passion. Feed and regard him not. Then she turns to Macbeth and says, are you a man? She convinces the lords that Macbeth experiences these fits and has done since childhood, and there's nothing to worry about. And that if the lords pay too much attention to him, they will extend his passion, extend his fit. She asks him to eat, sit, and not be concerned. And Macbeth's response to Lady Macbeth asking, is he a man? Is I and a bold one that dare look on that which might appall the devil? Oh, proper stuff, this is the very painting of your fear. This is the air-drawn dagger which you said led you to Duncan. Oh, these flaws and starts, impostors to true fear, would well become a woman's story at a winter's fire authorised by her grandam. Shame itself, why do you make such faces when all's done? You look but on a straw. Macbeth says, yes, I am a man, and a bold one, because even the devil would not look upon this ghost. And Lady Macbeth says that you're speaking nonsense. Once again, it's just the hallucination similar to the dagger. And these outbursts don't even look like real fear. It's more like how you would act if a woman was telling you a scary story by a fire with your grandmother. She said that she's ashamed of him. Let's get some annotations down. Let's highlight never shake thy gory locks at me. This is hyperbolic. And it suggests the horrific and shocking nature of the ghost. Particularly here the word gory. And then highlight that dare look on that which might appall the devil. Oh, apologies, I've done the wrong annotations here. So that's not linked to that one. It's linked to that one. So sorry. This one just references the horrid appearance of the ghost. Apologies, I hope that hasn't ruined your books. I know some of you will probably moan at me for doing that. These quotes are very, very significant, and the tasks on your worksheet are going to look at these in a lot more detail. So these notes in here are very brief, but the worksheet will allow you to analyse them in a little bit more detail. Okay, I'm going to highlight here, this is the very painting of your fear. Or proper stuff. Lady Macbeth believes that these hallucinations are harmless. Are harmless. And we're also going to add that this foreshadows, shorthand we're going to write FS, her own demise, which will unfold as the text develops. Also, would well become a woman's story at a winter's flight authorised her by her grandma. Again, she attempts to feminise Macbeth. I'm not sure why I did my Z like that. Feminized Macbeth. Okay, pause here if you need to get these down. We're going to move on. Macbeth says, Prithee, see there, behold, look, lo, how say you, why, what care I, if thou canst not speak to, if charnel houses and graves must send those that we bury back, our monument shall be the moors of kites. And then the ghost vanishes. Here he's saying that he wants Banquo's ghost to speak, and that if the dead are going to return from the graves, then there's no point in burying bodies or dying. Let's get some annotations for this section before we move on. Prithee, see there, behold, look, lo. These sentences are short and exclamatory due to the exclamation marks. Sentences show his terror. And we're going to highlight this bit here about him talking about the dead not staying dead. And Macbeth seems to be haunted by this. Okay, and then the ghost vanishes. Lady Macbeth says, What quite unmanned in folly? If I stand here, I saw him, fie for shame. Lady Macbeth says, Are you being so foolish? You're not a man. Lady Macbeth said, He's speaking nonsense. Blood hath been shed ere now in the olden time, ere human statute purged the gentle will. Aye, and since two murderers have been performed, too terrible for the ear. The times have been that, when the brains were out, the man would die, and there an end. But now they rise again, with 20 mortal murders on their crowns, and push us from our stalls. This is more strange than such a murder is. He's saying that blood is often spilled, and since the murders have been committed, that they are too awful to talk about. And it used to be that when you knocked on a man's brain out, he would just die and that would be it. But now there's people rising from the dead, even though they've got 20 gashes to the face. He's referencing Banquo's murdered them. He said that this haunting is even more stressful and stranger than murder itself. And again here, Lady Macbeth is asserting her dominance by questioning his masculinity. Asserting dominance. And more specifically, she's embarrassed by Macbeth. She's embarrassed because the behaviour that he's exhibiting creates a negative impression of his ability to rule the country. Embarrassed as showing inability to rule. Obviously bearing in mind that all of the attendant lords are currently watching this unfold. Okay, pause here if you need a second. We're going to move on. My worthy lord, your noble friends do lack you. I do forget, do not muse at me, my most worthy friends. I have a strange infirmity which is nothing to those that know me. Come, love and health to all, then I'll sit down. Give me some wine, feel full. I drink to the general joy of the whole table, and to our dear friend Banquo whom you miss. Would he were here, to all and him we first and all, to all our duties and to the pledge. Macbeth returns to his guests now, and he's asking them not to be alarmed and to have another toast. The ghost of Banquo re-enters. Macbeth yelps, Avaunt and quit my sight! Let the earth hide thee, thy bones are marrowless, thy blood is cold. Thou hast no speculation in those eyes which thou dost glare with. Again, this is one of the quotes that we're going to annotate in a little bit more detail. But he's saying, "Go, get out of my sight, stay in your grave. Your blood is cold and there's no marrow in your bones. And you're staring at me with eyes that have no power to see because you are dead." Lady Macbeth says, "Think of this, good peers, but as a thing of custom, 'tis no other, only it spoils the pleasure of the time." She asks them not to worry about it, it's just a habit. Okay. "What man dare I dare approach thou like the rugged Russian bear, the armed rhinoceros, or the Hythen tiger? Take any shape but that, and my firm nerve shall never tremble or be alive again. And dare me to the desert with thy sword, if trembling I inhabit then. Protest me the baby of a girl, hence horrible shadow, unreal mockery, hence." He says that I'm as brave as any other man. I could fight a bear, a rhino, and a tiger. Take any shape other than this ghost, and I will never tremble in fear. Or come back to life and we'll have a proper fight. We'll have a duel. And if I do tremble, then you can call me a little girl. And he asks again the ghost to get out. Okay, let's get some meditation. And then the ghost vanishes. "Why so, being gone, I am man again, pray you sit still." He says he's returned to being a man. Let's get some meditations again. So these are similes comparing what Macbeth could fight if it wasn't a ghost. The similes suggest how this unreal form, the ghost, cannot be fought. And again, hence horrible shadow, unreal mockery, hence. He's using imperatives here. Get out. Imperatives which show his weakness and desperation. Lady Macbeth continues, "You have displaced the mirth, broke the good meeting with most admired disorder." She said that you've ruined the gathering. Macbeth returns to his guests and says, "Can such things be and overcome us like a summer's cloud, without our special wonder? You make me strange even to the disposition that I owe, when now I think you can behold such sights, and keep the natural ruby of your cheeks when mine is blanched with fear." He asks of the guests, "Can things like this happen so suddenly without making us all astonished?" And he says that you're making me feel like I don't know myself by looking at me in these horrible ways and keeping a straight face while my face has gone white with fear. Let's get some meditation to this bit. This question here references the strangeness of the vision, as he asks, "Can't you just forget? Can you not be astonished by what you've just seen?" Strangeness of vision. And here when he says your cheeks are red while my are pale with fear, here he's questioning their characters. How are you not scared? Obviously he's failed to realise that no one else has seen this ghost yet and will not see it. He questions their character, he questions their ability to not be frightened. In the meantime, he questions his own character and his own strength. pause here, we're about to move on. Ross, what sights, my lord? I pray you speak not, he grows worse and worse, questions enrages him. At once, good night, stand not upon the order of your going, but go at once. Good night, and better health attend his majesty. A kind good night to all, exu and all but Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. Lady Macbeth asks the lords to leave because them speaking to him and questioning him is only making him worse. Macbeth says, it will have blood, they say, blood will have blood, stones have been known to move and trees to speak. August and understood relations have by magpies and chosen rooks brought forth the secretest man of blood. What is the night? Almost at odds with morning, which is which? Macbeth says that there's an old saying that the dead will have their revenge. Gravestones have been known to move, trees to speak, to bring guilty men to justice. And he asks, he said that murderers have been exposed by crows and magpies, and asks what time of night it is. And Macbeth said it's almost morning. That Macbeth can never tell whether it's night or dark. Okay, we're going to get a lot of annotations now. We're nearly at the end, so keep going. Understood relations have by maggots, pies, and chus and rooks brought forth the secret man of blood. He says that nature will disclose secrets, and we all know already is nature has been disrupted by Macbeth's actions, and therefore disclosing his secrets. Secrets disclosed by nature almost at odds with morning, which is which. Okay, there's going to be quite a few annotations for this one. So again, morning and light is symbolic of hope and good, and night is symbolic of evil and bad. So let's add that in. Symbolic of hope versus corruption. And this foreshadows a conflict, which we're going to see unfold at the end of this act, between good and evil, particularly almost at odds. If you are at odds with someone, there's a disagreement. So it foreshadows conflict between the good and the evil. Pause here. How sayest thou that Macduff denies his person at our great bidding? Did you send to him, sir? I hear it by the way, but I will send. There's not a one of them but in his house I keep a servant feed. I will tomorrow, and betimes I will to the weird sisters. More shall they speak, for now I am bent to know by the worst means the worst. For mine own good all causes shall give way. I am in blood steeped in so far that should I wade no more, returning whereas tedious as go over. Strange things I have in head that will to hand, which must be acted ere they must be scanned. You lack the season of all nature's sleep. Come, will to sleep. My strange and self-abuse is the initiate fear that wants hard use. We are yet but young indeed. And then the exit. Macbeth at the top there questions why Macduff, another thane, has refused to come to the banquet even though Macbeth has commanded him. And Macbeth says that he has a servant paid to spy for him, and that he's going to see the witches and they'll tell him more because he's determined to know the worst about what's going to happen. And he says that he's so far into a river of blood that even if it stopped now, it would be as hard to go back to being good as it is to keep killing people. He says that he has schemes in his head, strange things I have in head. Like, he has to do these things, he has to act upon these ideas. Okay, this question at the top here creates suspense as we are left wondering why. As we are left wondering why Macduff hasn't arrived. Creates suspense, and we're going to meet Macduff in scene 6. The fact that he has a spy looking at Macduff hints at his paranoia. Again, he feels like everybody is against him now. And he's going to speak to the witches. He's actually seeking out the witches now. Seeking witches. And this shows not only his desperation, but also the influence that evil has on him. As he wants more information and he knows that he can get it from seeing the witches. And this is significant because he's no longer concerned. Again, pause if you need a second. He's no longer concerned about the witches and what they bring. Okay, and here he says, I am in blood steeped in so far that should I wade no more, returning were as tedious as going over. This is a metaphor for the murders that he's been committed, that he's steeped so far in blood that he cannot return. So the metaphor shows his irreversible, so unchanging transgression. We looked at that word last week, when someone goes past social and moral boundaries. Pause here if you need a second to get these down. Okay, I'm just going to rub some of this stuff out so we have a bit more room. Okay, I'm just going to get these last few lines annotated. He says that he must act upon the things that he has in his mind. This shows a lack of reflection. Before, he would reflect on the reasons for killing Duncan, but now he says we must act. Lack of reflection shows his transgression, changing. Remember, this says you haven't slept in a while. Again, this indicates that he's plagued by guilt. Remember, lack of sleep represents guilt. He's plagued by guilt. Macbeth says, come well to sleep, my strange and self-abuse is the initiate fear that once hard used we are yet but young indeed. Here he says that maybe his delusions come from inexperience, maybe his fear and the hallucinations are coming from the fact that he hasn't killed many people and they are beginners, they are young in the deed. And this line here implies continued killing. It seems like that he's going to continue killing. Okay, make sure that's down. And once that's done, return to the worksheet and complete the task for Act 3, Scene 4.